Welcome again today. Thank you for back, and congratulations on a great first day. I'm speaking to you today as not only a career prosecutor, it's been about 27 years I've been a prosecutor, but I've also been an educator and a Christian minister for most of that time. And it is from that vantage point that I'm going to be delving a little deeper today into what parents can do to make sure that they protect their children from predators. So on the first slide, I have a graphic illustrating one of the really basic foundational principles that we work. I mean, Lady Justice may be blind, but parents are not. They're perceptive. And when they are, they're able to detect the ways that predators infiltrate the lives of families and children each and every day. When we think through what we're going to be talking about today, if we can go to the next slide and really sort of take a more of a global look at my last book and the 4 areas parents can use to protect their families. They spell FLAG, F-L-A-G. Focus is the first one. Anybody new you invite into your life, what are they interested in? You, your children, their lives, your background information. Lifestyle is going to be the next thing we're going to be looking at. In other words, how do they live their lives and what can we tell from that? Associations. When I was growing up, my folks used to say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Much hasn't changed today. We'll talk about that. And then goals. You want to know more about the people you invite into your lives, both personally and professionally. What kind of people are they? And what does that tell you about how safe they are to have around your kids? So moving on, we take a look at one of the very first things I want to talk about. Where are the children? Focus becomes fixation. A healthy interest in kids is great. Most adults have a healthy interest in children, but not all. And that's what we're going to look at now. How do we make the distinction? So moving on, let's take a look at, on the next slide, please. Let's take a look at how dangerous the virtual world can be regarding who attends these meetings that you and your family and your children may be on. I always worry about those people that are tuning into free Zoom calls with no name and no video, no photograph. Who are they and why are they there? These are important questions for you as a parent. Moving on from here, let's take a look at some of the research and what it shows us on how important it is to know who it is that is interacting with your children online. If we could please move the slide deck along. If you want to go ahead and advance the slide. Okay. So one thing I want to tell you about that is very interesting and important for parents to understand, the interactivity component of virtual communication is probably the most dangerous because it allows predators to interact in real time and build relationships. It's very different than posting on social media, something we can think about, maybe come back to. Live interaction is often characterized by things parents don't understand. It's characterized often by predators being honest about how old they are, catering to the vulnerability of curious teenagers and adolescents. Traffickers, child predators, child molesters all cater to that level of curiosity that there is nothing parents can do about. Adolescents are curious because biologically, physiologically, and psychologically, they're bound and geared towards this curiosity. It's a healthy curiosity on the part of the adolescent, not so much on the part of those that are interacting with them online. So if we can move to the next slide now and take a look a little bit about the fact that empirically, statistically, psychologically, we know this is true because studies have confirmed it. You know it's true anecdotally because you have teenagers that have phones. And if they don't have a phone themselves because they're too young, they have phones they can borrow and use at school. So we can't get away from the reality that young people are online. The best we can do is build that healthy communication with our teenagers, with our young people, to help them through this stage in order to cultivate that curiosity in a fashion that's going to protect them. That's the whole theme of this conference, protecting our children from those that are out to have unhealthy relationships. So let's move to the next slide. So one thing I want to point out when it comes to I call it from the chat room to the courtroom. This is how it's been going for years. Even before the pandemic, when all the kids were learning online, they were using chat rooms. Now there are many more options, sadly. But guess what, parents? So do we. We have many more ways in which we can use parental controls, in which we can become tech savvy, or we can look at our kids and what they're doing online in this fashion. So let's move on and talk about a couple of things that we could do as parents to sort of gauge this lifestyle. So I teach a lot of educators on how they can detect predators in their school. And this whole idea that teachers and students have become sexually involved, I prosecute those teachers. I've been doing this for 25 years. And I can tell you that there were red flags flying all over the place in terms of the kind of lifestyle these educators were living. Lifestyle, as I say in my last book, is personality revealed. Let's go to the next slide. And there's so many scripture passages that talks about exactly this. It's this idea that actions speak louder than words. This is one of my favorites in Proverbs. As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. Show me how you live and I'll show you who you are. That is something we as parents can be savvy about right from the very beginning. Let's move on and see what else. It's also true, lifestyle-wise, that we always worry in retrospect about that axe murderer next door, that old stereotype where the neighbor is interviewed by the news and says, he seemed like such a nice guy. This is the late Ariel Castro, who kidnapped and kept 3 girls prisoner in his basement. Do you know how many of his neighbors that saw him every day had ever been inside his house? 0. Can you imagine having a neighbor or a friend and nobody knows anyone who's ever actually seen the inside of where this person lives? How do you know what somebody is about, what their lifestyle is like, if you only see them in a superficial environment, even if you've seen them for years? That's what I call hiding in plain sight. The neighbor of the axe murderer next door, the proverbial neighbor who says he seemed like such a nice guy, there goes on to say, I never really knew him at all. He kept to himself. Let's move to the next slide. The reason I call this red flags after 5 is if we knew where someone spends their time when they're outside of the office, when they're outside of whatever forum you know them. Are they at an arcade? Or are they at the shopping mall food court? This is the place that is a predator's haven. Why? Who's there? Kids that are too old to be supervised around the clock, but too young to drive. It's that perfect age group where they're vulnerable, they're impressionable, and guess what? They're by themselves with their peers without adult supervision. Let's move on to the next. And when you are leaving your children at theme parks, maybe it seems like it's safe. Maybe it's a carnival atmosphere where you know their peers are going to be there. Maybe it's a school field trip. I say beware the single rider. Beware of that adult that is advertising the ability, hey, I'm a single, can I get on with you? I can tell you I have watched adults get on with kids for 25 years and always agonized over why. Is it really because you're just a single rider and you don't want to wait in line? Or is it because you desire the company of a young person, of a teen, of somebody you can get to know in an environment that seems innocent? It's not. Now, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of single adults that go to theme parks by themselves, but we worry when we have other indicia like this, identity claims. Lifestyle is about what we call identity claims and behavioral residue. So you may have a poster like this up in a teacher's office. Teacher of the year. Great. That's good. But let's go on to the next slide and see what else. You may also have what we call behavioral residue. This means, are there things lying around that the adult has failed to clean up? Here's one red flag I've seen for my entire career. You have a 40 or 50-year-old that has a subscription to some sort of teenage magazine and they don't have kids. So why the subscription? Why are they looking at those pictures? Why are they familiarizing themselves and reading articles that are geared towards 17-year-olds? This is what we call behavioral residue. This is the part of your personality that you have failed to clean up. Let's go to the next slide and see what else. Sometimes you really can't tell Because adults that want to test the waters, as I described yesterday, kind of want to push those boundaries. They may expose kids to adult material to gauge their reaction. They may have Playboy or other type of adult themed types of entertainment. Let's go to the next slide and see what else they might do. They might actually transmit information online as an accident. Now, there are incidents like this one that I have on the screen that probably really are accidents. When you have teachers that have adult material on their website and they're screen sharing and they honestly forgot about it. So you don't really know the motivation. But I can tell you on the next slide that there are plenty of adults that will intentionally expose young people to adult material to just gauge their reaction. I say this is a great scripture to talk about how from the heart the mouth speaks. What does somebody say? It's one of the best ways to tell who they are. If we can move on. I always explain the way in which we as parents and adults interview our victims, interview our young people. That's one of the best ways in which we can deduce who they are. We can talk about the Maslow's pyramid of needs in a way that is specifically designed to meet our young people exactly where they are, physiologically up to mentally. So let's move on from here and see what are the biggest lessons we can learn from this. Is that our victims come in all shapes and sizes, and they're victimized based on their unique proclivities. They're victimized because somebody who's watching your child, if they watch long enough, guess what they're going to learn? They're going to learn where the cracks in the armor are. They're going to learn exactly what the immediate needs are. What can they meet? Is it somebody that's homeless, maybe a runaway, who's thirsty, who needs shelter, who needs transportation? They're able to tell and cater and meet these immediate needs in a way that parents and educators and even people at the church sometimes are not, because they haven't been paying as close of attention as the. Thank you very much. We were almost completed. I'll just sort of kind of wrap it up with interviewing our victims, our precious young children. All the way up through 18, we have to keep in touch with that developmental stage and what's interesting and valuable to them at that stage. So sometimes we forget that chronological age doesn't always match up with emotional age. And that's one of the things we as parents, as educators, as role models and mentors always need to keep in touch. You just heard from Dr. Muller some of the reasons why. So it's almost even better that I'm kind of wrapping it up after she has shared some of that incredible wisdom. So moving on, what we really want to think about, kind of bringing it home here to what we're going to be probably talking about on the panel in a minute, if we want to advance the slide. We also care about associations, and let's go one more and talk about what else we care about with these young people. We care about who they're friends with, and if we can move on with the slide deck, we can also look through some of what we care about as far as the goals. So we care about watching and monitoring, and not monitoring in the sense that, it's some sort of a, because I said so, but in that collaborative communication sense where we're friends, we're peers, we're interacting with our young people in a fashion that really is letting them know that it's only because we want them to have good, healthy relationships and not the kind that they sometimes end up forming online. So moving on, we look at how we can ensure that we can do that. So if we want to keep moving, we check the way that we have the communication going online. The photograph there is from one of my cases where I had an educator that was sadly involved with one of her students and posting on Facebook as if the student were a peer. One of the big red flags that was right on display for us to see, and we did, and introduced that in the trial. So moving on to the last G, that's the flag, the four things we look at, and that stands for goals. What are the priorities? Does somebody want to get married, or does somebody just want to remain a kid forever like Peter Pan and just have fun? Those things we can tell. So when we talk to our children, okay, they're afraid they're going to be talking to somebody like Judge Judy there on the slide, who I think is globally famous. So I think maybe everybody recognizes this. But continuing on, just kind of bringing it home here at the end in terms of the way we talk to our kids. Performance expectations, and let's stop here for a second. The reluctance to report, the safe space, and all of the rest of it. This is all designed, and I'll end it here, to make sure that we have those open lines of communication that facilitate us being able to protect our children. So thank you very much for having me and letting me just kind of finish out the program, and I look forward to the rest of the day.